Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. SBF, the fraudster scammer, former CEO of Ponzi scheme cryptocurrency exchange FTX, was interviewed at an event hosted by the New York Times and Dealbook. And I will tell you right now, I was disappointed. I ended up being able to watch the whole thing. I wasn't able to watch it live as it happened, but I got my hands on a copy of it. And I shared the link on Twitter, by the way, for anybody curious. And my gosh, it was like it's not that the interviewer Andrew Ross Sorkin, I believe is his name. It's not that he was intentionally trying to throw softball questions, but it seemed like a very softball interview. I just don't think that he's the right guy. If you want to really get to the heart of what went down with SBF and FTX and all the fraudulent happenings, I think he needed a different person. He just was not the guy to do it. And so like it's the type of questions that are perfectly fine when you're just having an interview with a regular person who's probably an upstanding citizen. Maybe have a somewhat difficult sounding question. And there were a couple of those technically. There were. But the follow-up after he gave a BS nonsense answer or was just kind of hemming and hawing and beating around the bush, there was not sufficient follow-up. And I'm just sitting there thinking, if I were talking to this guy, I would have just absolutely nailed him. And I wasn't even prepared for it. There's all sorts of things I could have asked just from following up and not preparing for the interview, because I've been paying attention just as an observer here. So I'm going to share with you perspective from a number of people, including attorney Jeremy Hogan, attorney John Deaton. I've got a couple things from Charles Gasparino of Fox Business, as well as Eleanor Terrett, also of Fox Business. But before going further, I do want to be clear. I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. Now, first things first here, this interview, it was at a summit which took place in the United States, but not surprisingly, SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, the little butt nugget with a fro, he was just logged in remote. He was still in the Bahamas. I have a suspicion that if he were to arrive on U.S. soil, there's a chance he may be arrested immediately, and he's probably well aware of that. He was even asked about that, but he was like, yeah, I'm not so sure. I just want to stay here in the Bahamas, one of those BS. Pretty much everything he said was a BS lie. It was very clear he didn't want to give straightforward answers, and he was caught in lies also. And even when he was caught in lies, Andrew Ross Sorkin didn't really press him. So it was definitely softball seeming, I'll tell you that. And it's just amazing to me because like he's doing the opposite of what his lawyers are telling him to do. Obviously, any lawyer with half a brain would tell SBF, do not speak publicly. Become a hermit. Do not speak to anyone because there's an opportunity you're just going to self-incriminate. You're not going to do yourself any favors. And that's always what happens in these cases. But for some reason, this guy thinks that he's above it all. I don't know if it's ego or what, but he thinks that he can just come out and maybe he thinks it makes him look less guilty. And he's pretending like he hasn't done anything criminal still. I can't get in his head, but it is bizarre that he's speaking publicly and it's not helping him. So in that sense, I'm glad he's speaking publicly, but he is lying, and that part's kind of infuriating. And, when he was asked questions by Andrew Ross Sorkin, what about the funds? Like the investments, obviously, FTX went belly up, but, he was asked in a very softball-sounding kind of way, so the funds that you invested, which ultimately were bad investments, we understand that they were from funds that you were allowed to invest, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that's basically what he said. Funds you were allowed to invest and funds you weren't allowed to invest. I'm sitting here thinking, bitch, what your problem is? Why are you not saying, so why'd you steal customer funds and invest them? Because that's a fact. Why would you word it in such a way that it's like, you use funds you're allowed to dabble with, but also funds you're not allowed to dabble with? Isn't that right? Isn't that right? And he was asking if that was so, when there's clear evidence that he did this. What in the ever-loving hell is that? That is weak sauce as far as I'm concerned. And he got away with it. In that interview he did. It was just that part, that was one of the biggest face palms. It's like when he's saying this stuff, it's like, oh my God. Because think about it. It is a no-brainer. If everything was backed 1-to-1, then when there was a bank run on the exchange and all of the FTX customers were trying to withdraw funds, the funds would have been there. They weren't there because he spent them. He took them and he spent it all. How do you not think of that, Andrew Ross Sorkin? And again, I don't think that Andrew Ross Sorkin was intentionally trying to be, a little like limp-wristed on this interview. I just think he's not the right guy to ask hardball questions. He's just not. This is not who he is. It's not his temperament. He can ask fine, technically a couple difficult questions, but he has no follow-up. He's not an attorney. Let's say that, cross-examining or anything of the sort. Now there was this tweet from attorney Jeremy Hogan, because he watched this thing as it was happening live earlier today. And Jeremy Hogan wrote, SBF is getting a light cross-examination at the New York Times /Dealbook Summit and has made at least 3 incriminating statements so far. Why are his lawyers or parents letting him do this? Yeah, well, a couple things on that. Andrew Ross Sorkin actually did ask SBF if his lawyers advised that he should do this, and the crowd laughed. And his SBF's answer was, I think he said, it might have been exactly, he said, very much no, in terms of he wasn't supposed to do this, and then the crowd laughed again. It's just, again, astonishing that he's in public. Now, as far as incriminating, oh yes, I don't know which 3 things Attorney Hogan was counting at that point in time, but yeah, there are probably more than that, because he was confessing to things left and right in terms of negligence and incompetency. It's like, even just from a business perspective, you would think there's tons of things right there. The thing he wouldn't admit to, though, was intentionally stealing customer funds. Anytime, and he was asked that in a few different ways, and anytime that came up, he just gave this really long, bloated answer and got his way out of it, and he wasn't pressed sufficiently. And then somebody who goes by the name BTFD wrote to Jeremy Hogan on Twitter and said, interesting that you are calling this light cross-examination. You are obviously much more schooled in this than me, and I respect your opinion, but the interviewer seems to be asking pretty tough questions. Maybe because I'm so used to the puff pieces I've seen about him lately. Attorney Hogan responded and wrote, this is very light cross, in terms of very light cross-examination. A decent prosecutor would have him in shreds by now in the follow-up questions. Exactly. And so it's not that there wasn't a single question that started off like an appropriate amount of ferocity, but there was no sufficient follow-through. No sufficient follow-through whatsoever. But again, that's not what his skill set is. So I don't think that he was trying to let SBF off. He was just treating the same way he's, used to treating any guest. And he even thanked him for showing up. He said he even thanked him for showing up, given the situation and potential legal implications. And the crowd applauded at the start of this interview. And I'm just rolling my eyes, just like almost everybody else that was ended up watching this thing. Completely absurd. Here's something that Attorney Deaton said on the topic. He said, watch closely at SBF when Andrew Ross Sorkin says S-coin to keep it polite, as an S-word coin. Andrew is reading a letter from a man who lost his life savings. If SBF was truly remorseful and appreciated the devastation he's caused, he would respond differently. Yeah, exactly. And so he read verbatim a letter from this guy that lost his life savings. He said it was $2 million. And Andrew Ross Sorkin effectively asked, so what do you say to this guy? And he kind of said, it was just a weak I think he's not remorseful. I just don't get the sense he's remorseful at all. There's no compassion in his behavior, in his eyes, anything. The little butt nugget with the fro, he just is. He just exists. I don't think he gives a damn. And he ended up saying, deeply sorry about what happened. I'm just not buying it. I'm really not buying it. He seems just like the same old SBF as ever, as if nothing had gone wrong. And then there was this from Charles Gasparino, who wrote, interesting to note that SBF owned the vast majority of Alameda, but as I recall in the interview, he suggested he was just a part owner, not the de facto sole owner. Yeah, and that was interesting. I caught that as well. He made it sound as though in the interview he was almost entirely hands-off with what was happening with Alameda. He made it sound like there was I think he explicitly stated that it was like a conflict of interest, so he's trying to be hands-off, and that what he was doing just with FTX was more than a full-time job. I remember him saying that. But my gosh, he still is in charge, and he still took funds and allowed it to go to Alameda. Eleanor Turt retweeted Charles Gasparino and said, yet he had no idea, in quote, no idea, what was going on there, as he stated at least 5 times throughout the interview, thus essentially assigning all the blame to at Caroline Capital, so that would be Caroline, the CEO and Harry Potter fan, which he's very famous for, of Alameda. And so she said, thus essentially assigning all the blame to Caroline, who he was allegedly dating at the time. And Attorney Deaton responded to that and said, if I was her dad, I'd be advising her to cut a deal ASAP and offer SBF on a silver platter. And by the way, Caroline, she already escaped to the Bahamas. From what I've heard, she went to Hong Kong, and then she caught a flight to Dubai where she believes that she's safe from extradition, allegedly. I'm just telling you what I've heard at this point. John Deaton's crypto law organization wrote, after he made multiple self-incriminating statements, Andrew Ross Sorkin asks SBF, what do your lawyers think of you giving this interview? The audience bursts into laughter. Bankman-Fried seems to be the only person in this broadcast who won't acknowledge he broke the law. Yeah, exactly. Couldn't be more obvious. And then there was this from on-chain analyst Will Clemente, who wrote, Sam just said that he knew on November 6th that things were going to end badly. Here he is on November 6th assuring customers that FTX could process withdrawals as normal and that there was nothing wrong. Yeah, and so there's this thread. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I've covered this on my channel before. This is from November 6th. And so during this interview, he stated that by the end of the day on November 6th, he was starting to feel worried. And by November 7th, that's when he knew that there was a problem, and that there was a chance that customers may not be able to withdraw everything. So he knew that by the end of the day, November 6th, it's certainly all day November 7th. He articulated that, by the way, in the interview. And by November 8th, he thought that it was highly probable, in his words, effectively, and I'm paraphrasing, that customers would not all of them would be able to withdraw their funds if they wanted to. So bank run, ends badly when you lend out your customers' funds when you're not allowed to. Very badly. So, as far as what Will Clemente pointed out there, because again, there's the tweet where he's pointing out, hey, everything's fine on November 6th. That's bad enough. But after, in this interview, Andrew Ross Sorkin pointed out, or he got the answer from SBF that, yeah, on November 7th, that's when I thought that there were some serious problems. And then that's when he had a good gotcha. And this is one of the better things Andrew Ross Sorkin did. He said, okay, well, there was a deleted tweet from you on November 7th, and you stated that everything was fine. And he read it. I don't have it in front of me right now. I actually have covered it on my channel before. But it was effectively stating that everything's fine with FTX. Customer withdrawals are working. Everything's fine. It was to that extent. Business as usual. But he had just finished stating, SBF had stated, that on November 7th, he didn't think everything was fine. But then there was a tweet where he was publicly saying everything was fine. And he deleted that tweet shortly thereafter. And he got away with that. Like Andrew Ross Sorkin, again, it's not his skill set to be pushy on this. It's not what he does. I've never seen him be pushy. He'll ask some stuff questions and he leaves it at that. Whatever the answer is, the answer is. That's pretty much it. So that part was disappointing. But again, I'm not actually mad at the guy. He's just not good at this. It's like, it was never going to be. I would have loved to see somebody else with some more grit interview SBF. That would have been better, let's say. And then there's this from John Deaton's crypto law organization, shared a clip of attorney John Deaton because he was on Fox Business today with Charles Payne. Crypto Law wrote, about an hour before the wildly self-incriminating interview by fraudster SBF, John Deaton bluntly said on Fox Business what no one doubts is true now. And, what they shared in this particular clip was, it may have been somebody in Congress, I can't remember who now, was stating that this is the equivalent of like the Lehman Brothers crypto moment. Remember Lehman Brothers bank, gigantic bank that ended up being insolvent, went to zero. That particular bank was not bailed out in 2008 during that crisis, and they're saying this is the crypto version of that. And attorney Deaton, I can only paraphrase here because I didn't actually transcribe this, but effectively he was saying the only thing that this will end up having in common with the Lehman situation, if anything, the only way that it'll have anything in common is if nobody goes to jail. That's about it. Because other than that, it's completely different because you're just talking about, this is not crypto. This is not a crypto moment. This is a fraudulent moment. Customer funds, they could have been invested, it could have been crypto, it could have been stocks, it could have been anything. If you take that value and then bet it on a bunch of stuff when you're not allowed to, and then it goes to zero, that's just fraud. It's nothing about crypto, obviously. And it also in the same segment, attorney Deaton brought up, look, because Charles Payne asked him, he's like, why isn't SBF in jail? And Attorney Deaton couldn't answer that. None of us can really firmly answer that. But he stated, look, there's more than enough to go ahead and arrest Sam Bankman-Fried. He cited the code that could be used to actually arrest him. And he said, look, even just wire fraud, and he rattled off a bunch of stuff, yet he's not arrested. You guys explain that. I can't. It doesn't make any damn sense. Now, you all know also that Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank fame, I have lost respect for this guy completely. He just continues to back SBF, and it makes me wonder if BitBoy Crypto Ben Armstrong is correct, and it makes me wonder if Kevin O'Leary actually is complicit in this and did something wrong. I can't help but wonder. I'm not going to make the accusation that he is. I do not know, but I know that Ben Armstrong is making the accusation that he is, and with this behavior being so bizarre, I don't know what to say. So there was a tweet from Bill Ackman, who is a multi-billionaire. He's a CEO of Pershing Square hedge fund, and I think he's worth like $3.5 billion or something. And he wrote, call me crazy, but I think SBF is telling the truth. And I was just like, oh my, it was after the interview. I'm like, wow, what is wrong with you? Yes, you're crazy. You're a bat S-word crazy. Hundo%. Excuse me. And then this is where Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank fame retweeted that and said, I lost millions as an investor in FTX and got sandblasted as a paid spokesperson for the firm, but after listening to that interview, I'm in the Bill Ackman camp about the kid. Oh, a couple things there. First of all, SBF is a grown-ass man. Don't call him a kid to make him seem all innocent and stuff. No. He may speak like a child using like, and so more than you expect a millennial to even, and he's in a different generation. But he's like 30 years old, I believe. That's a man. You calling him a kid? No. So you agree with Bill Ackman, the multi-billionaire, on this? You believe that SBF is telling the truth despite no shortage of evidence to the contrary? My mind is blown. And so I responded to Kevin O'Leary with the following. I wrote, are you guilty of something too? Why else would you say this? I feel obligated to ask because your position is completely unreasonable. SBF is a fraudster and scammer, period. And just as a friendly reminder for those of you who, if it wasn't clear enough in that tweet and you weren't caught up to speed here, Kevin O'Leary, invested in FTX. He was a paid spokesperson. Yes, so he had his hands on FTX and the happenings in a major way. I just don't know if there is something more in depth, but if there's not, then why is he saying what he's saying? Like, just read the room, because I'm telling you, if you go to any of his tweets having nothing to do with crypto or SBF, it's a bunch of people calling him out constantly, endlessly, over his support of SBF. Why would you do this, ruining your own reputation, unless you need to, put up this face of, I think that everything's fine? Because what would you do if you are guilty? Wouldn't it be more probable that you would, say, I think everything's fine, or I don't think that there is any fraud? No, there's no fraud. SBS is fine. If you had your hands on it, yeah, I think you would say that. So I don't know if he did, and I'm not making that accusation, but this is how my brain's working here. Can you blame me? Because this is not normal behavior from Kevin O'Leary. That's not what a normal person would do in response to this. It's very strange. So again, I don't know if he was complicit. I don't know if he did anything illegal. I just know that there's the accusation from Ben Armstrong, and this behavior is bizarre. And I also then wrote, there is a 100% chance that SBF broke the law. What the hell is your malfunction, O'Leary? Look here. And I shared Jeremy Hogan's tweet from the other day in which he wrote, the FTX terms of service at 8.2.6 are very clear. All digital assets were to be held in user accounts and not to be used by FTX for any purpose, e.g. speculative investments. There's no wiggle room. It's what I would call a grand problema for them. And here you can see, here it is right here. All digital assets are held in your account on the following basis. And I don't feel the need to read the whole thing. If you want to pause and read this, this is the terms of service for FTX. Couldn't be more clear that the little butt nugget broke the law. He absolutely did. What a disgusting excuse for a human. He's human debris, if anything. I'll go to wrap up there because this is really steaming my vegetables. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.